Hey, welcome back to Treasures Galore. I wanted to make a video about a topic that's probably not going to be too popular, I would imagine, considering what most people think this chase might be. But that's alright, this isn't really a popularity contest. But I really want to bring it up because it's really interesting, right? I mean, Forrest has always told us to think about the what ifs. So, why would he think of the what ifs in this treasure hunt? I mean, what could we all really be missing that is hindering us from finding this chest? And I know a whole bunch of people have different things of opinions about it, but I kind of wanted to bring up my what ifs. And first, I am, like I always say, I'm a book purist, but I'm going to read this article. And before I read it, I just want to warn people from getting information from news articles because they always butcher what Forrest Fenn says, or that's what Forrest Fenn says, at least. So, in this article, I'm going to kind of skim through it and bring up some points that I think are really interesting. And then I want to go back to the book because I'm a book purist. And then bring up some interesting things that I think tie back into this and kind of just give an overview of one of my what ifs. So, if you've never read this article, I would suggest that you do so. It's really, really interesting. I think it's a good article, whether it has truths in it or not. But I kind of want to bring up some things in this. So, anyways, it's a Newsweek article posted on August 20th, 2012. So, the article's titled Forrest Fenn Wants You to Find His Treasure and His Bones. So, I'm not going to read it all, but it talks about Forrest and, his Santa Fe art gallery and all the fancy things that he's had, and kind of give an example about the paintings that he sold, and then talks about the codex for a minute. But I kind of wanted to bring up this right here. So he talks about he had a tour of his home, and he saw the mummified falcon from King Tut's tomb, blah, 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 the Sitting Bull's peace pipe. And he says, after an undercover agent took a similar tour in 2009, the federal government raided Fenn's house as a part of the biggest ever suspected case of grave robbing, codenamed Cerberus Action, after the mythical three-headed dog that guards the underworld. The case is ongoing, according to the FBI, which declined to discuss. So it's bringing up the raid that happened at Forrest Fenn's house in 2009, a year before he came out with the thrill of the chase and hid the treasure chest. So I don't think that the raid had really much to do with the chase because, as you know, the codex was written in 2005, and in 2005, Douglas Preston tells us that Forrest Fenn told him of this idea long ago. So his idea has nothing to do with him hiding the chest or from the raid that happened, to hide it, illegal artifacts or whatnot or whatever. I've heard that one floating around a little bit. Don't think it has much to do with it, but it may. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to continue. So Finn's relationship to the law can be hard to pinpoint. He declines all wrongdoing in one breath, only to brag of his exploits in the next, swaggering towards self-incrimination in the process. He says he can't discuss the FBI case, for example, because his lawyer told him, if you talk about it, you could lose it. Finn later told me he misspoke. He hasn't exactly gone into hiding either. 2012, he published The Thrill of the Chase. So, again, talking about his exploits, and Finn saying that he could lose it all if he tells the truth, pretty much. So, I want to continue. I'm going to skip this. You guys should read this on your own time. Just going to kind of bring up the high points. In this paragraph, he talks about at the height of his gallery days, they The employees were 16 and sales topped $6 million a year. And then goes on to say Santa Fe society was flush with tales about the invader Texan with explosive tastes, and yet despite the attention, Fenn remained essentially mysterious. He had arrived in 1972 as a nobody, a middle-aged Air Force veteran with a modest retirement, a high school degree, and not a lick of experience in the art world. Shortly thereafter, he was a millionaire. The question was, how? So apparently there were some questions on how Forrest amassed that kind of wealth in such a quick time, which I think is an interesting topic, which I'm going to bring up later. So let's skip down to this right here. So it wasn't until the 1960s that Fenn's collecting flowered into a kind of obsession, relentless, instabilitable, excessive, rabid. Those are Fenn's own words. He landed a job teaching at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, America's archaeological mecca, the setting for centuries of human occupation and at least 500,000 graves. Today, the most of the graves are believed to have been plundered, but in Fenn's day, much of that area was still pristine. In my mind, he says, I've always been the best in the world at collecting cool things. From the sky, he learned to spot ruins by the pattern of cacti. Other times, he would slice through canyons looking for hidden cliff dwellings and caves. The most promising sites he would investigate by jeep. He ran into partners a tall, lantern-jawed cowboy named Bill Robinson, who lived out near what became Route 66, and John Whitaker, a second-generation highway worker who learned to hunt artifacts he unearthed while laying pavement. Fenn is shy about detailing his exploits, but two of Whitaker's daughters remember Fenn well, and so does another relative, then a teen, who sometimes went along for digs. Fenn was dashing to the two adolescent girls, Marilyn and Barbara. They recall him flying low in his F-100, buzzing the tops of their father's Chevy pickup, and unleashing a sonic boom that shook the desert. Later he appeared in their kitchen, beckoning their father to go out for a ride. The legality of these digs is murky, a matter of interpreting outdated laws, decade-old court decisions, and specific questions of geography. Since 1906, however, it has been illegal to take anything from public land without permission, let alone disturb historic grave sites, which were often the site of the most valuable riches. You can't dig out there without digging up some graves, admits the group of teenagers tag-alongs. Fenn himself, in conversation recorded by law enforcement, recounts digging in Arizona and removing a stone axe from the remains of an Indian who was crushed by a boulder. Fenn and his two partners got themselves into all kinds of slapstick trouble as well, scampering out of an unexploratory hole after a rattlesnake or a centipede squirmed through the wall, or getting yanked ankles first out of a collapsed cave, spitting sand and hollering. One day the men were in a cave, digging their heart's content. Barbara Whitaker recalls her father telling her when they heard the womp womp of a rotary blade growing louder and louder. We're screwed, was the general feeling inside the chamber. No use fighting it. They walked into the sunlight, expecting to be arrested by a green-suited ranger, he says. Instead, they found a U.S. Senator, Barry Goldwater. He wasn't there to bust them. He just wanted to dig too. Fenn would not collaborate on the story, but he did say this. When Goldwater wanted to take a group of Washington types out for a dig, he called Fenn, who recalls taking the expedition out in a Air Force helicopter. No one seemed concerned with the laws. These were U.S. senators, Fenn says. They make the laws. So, I'm going to keep reading. The gang broke up in the mid-1960s when Fenn was transferred to a base in Texas. But it wasn't breaking up anyway. Whitaker's children understood their father because Fenn wasn't just taking a treasure or two, but returning to the caves and stripping them clean. This was too much for John Whitaker, who had taken a job as a water manager on the Navajo reservation. Of these three, only Fenn turned it into a profession, says Barbara. He saw something that he could cash in on, and he made his family a fortune on it. Fenn rejects the claim that he grabbed every banana, but he admits that he started trading them. I'll trade a bracelet for 6 rings and then give 3 of the rings for a bracelet and a necklace, he told Forbes in 1978. He also says he took money by casting bronzes. And it goes on to say that he stole them from the Texas Tech practice football field, the sprinkler heads, and trading his way up and buying his gallery and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm going to bring up that point later, but let's keep going. Let's go down. Okay, so let's start here. Even here, it's hard to tell whether Fenn's digging has crossed any legal lines. 22 years ago, New Mexico accused them of disturbing graves on his pueblo, alleging obvious human remains that were piled and scattered. Fenn got the complaint thrown out when he learned that the state had trespassed to collect its evidence. But to this day, he doesn't deny finding possible graves. The key word in the law is discover, Fenn says. We found bones that might have been human, but we didn't discover that they were, so we covered them up and moved someplace else. Descendants of the San Lazaro Pueblo pray for him, and the head of the National Congress of American Indians told me he believes that collectors like Fenn are cursed, but only a distant barbed wire fence and signs that say federal property seem to curb Fenn's pursuit of the past. What's the difference between here and there? I asked. After Fenn had spent the day picking up bone pieces, beads, pottery, and prehistoric shell and turquoise pendants, he knew exactly. 18 months in jail and a $10,000 fine. So, the article goes on, and it's talking about searchers' adventures in this. But those are some really interesting things about the raid, and then about him, amassing his wealth so quickly, and then him and his buddies going out and pretty much raiding all these things and then selling it. So I want to bring you back to the thrill of the chase, and some of this is questions I have, and some of it's gonna tie back into this. So the first part I want to bring up in the thrill of the chase is the chapter My Spanish Toy Factory, which is on page 32. So, if you remember in the article, it says that he would trade his Indian artifacts, and pretty much that is how he started acquiring his wealth. And then he got into the art, he started selling art and stuff like that. But that's kind of how he acquired his wealth in the beginning. He traded for stuff. He acquired, you know what I mean? So, in My Spanish Toy Factory, he talks about grinding these marbles in his pocket. And he said, by the end of Spanish class, I had a pretty round marble that I could easily sell to one of the rich kids, who always had a ride to school. The going rate for one of my marbles was a dime. I could feel between my knees where to grind and to make it round so I could keep my eyes on Miss Ford. She thought I was paying attention, and that always made her suspicious. And I think it affected her concentration some. As sure as anything, that dime could get me a bag of Fritos and a Coke, and to me, lunch didn't get any better than that. After a while, I began to think bigger and started whittling yo-yos and spinning tops during class. For those wooden beauties, I could get a quarter, and that meant 2 bags of Fritos, a Coke, and a small ice cream, leaving me a nickel as a head start for the next day. I was beginning to learn the value of money and the advantages of a capitalistic style of government. Although it may not look like much now, it was a big deal to me then. So, it's kind of funny, right? He's talking about My Spanish Toy Factory, and he's saying he'd get these marbles and sell them to the rich kids. And then he started thinking bigger, and whittling yo-yos, and spinning tops, and selling them also. And he loved the type of government, which is not really a government, right? But he loved the advantages of a capitalistic style. So it kind of just caught up after I was reading this that could it be Fenn's bragging about acquiring some of his wealth from Indian ruins and trading them to the rich kids, and that's how he amassed his wealth? I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting. And thinking about the what ifs, does any of this have anything to do with finding the treasure? His original idea was to hide himself with the treasure chest and for you to rob his grave. The exact thing that he's caught in slack for over all these years is, taking Indian stuff, even with the Pueblo, that's legal because it's on his land. But there's a lot of people that cursed him. And then his idea of the treasure chest is him going out there and you doing that to him. Now, is that kind of to make amends for all the things he's done? I don't know. I will let you decide on that one. So there are the what ifs. What if, this stuff has something to do with the treasure chest? Maybe he hid the treasure chest at one of these Indian sites, and that's how he's, paying his dues back, I guess. I don't know. It's an interesting thought, right? Because in this article he says that he would fly and find the pattern of cacti and these caves. And in My War for Me, he talks about flying over this opening, and it was magical. And then also in Too Far to Walk, he talks about flying in his plane low at 500 feet, looking for different things, seeing the trees and cattle disappear behind his wings. So it's just an interesting thought. Let me know what you think. I'm not saying this has anything to do with it. I'm just saying this is pretty interesting stuff. And if you're going to spend a whole bunch of time searching for this treasure, you probably need to look at every single aspect that might have something to do with this chase. Not saying I'm right or wrong, but I definitely think it should cross people's mind when they are searching. So I want to bring up some questions that I have that not many people talk about, and when I ask people questions, they don't really give me an answer, and not like they can, but it's just, kind of interesting. So, in Thrill of the Chase, in the preface, and Rodney Greenway talked about this a little bit in his last video, and it kind of made me want to do this video. But in the preface, he says, "Please overlook my slight penchant for provocation and realize that all of us are environmentalists to some degree, and me the most." Well, what is provocation? It is the action or speech that makes someone annoyed or angry, especially deliberately. So he's saying this about the meadowlarks, right? If I shot meadowlarks, well, do you really think that his family was so poor we'd have to shoot a meadowlark? He'd have his 8-year-old kid shoot meadowlarks so they could eat? No, there's absolutely no way. Look up a meadowlark. They barely have any meat on them. And Forrest Fenn's dad was a principal, and they were good fishermen, and I'm sure, they had a whole bunch of different things like chickens and whatnot, so they wouldn't need meadowlarks. So who is he trying to deliberately annoy or make angry? Could My Spanish Toy Factor be one of them? I don't know. I'll let you decide. So, and also on page 4, he talks about his gaining experience wasn't always peaceful, especially during my early years of anxiety. Now, I thought that sentence was kind of interesting. I mean, he talks about being in trouble all the time, and growing up, you have some anxiety about what's going on, stuff like that. But I just thought that line was interesting also in the preface. So let's go to page 13. And this is a really interesting question that I have also. So at the end of page 13, he says, "Actually, there were 2 reasons why I never got around to writing my book. One was because I always had important things to do, and making plans is antagonistic to freedom. But the other reason was more important. My self-confidence was really down at the bottom." Why was Forrest Fenn's confidence down at the bottom? He lived this great life. He had this perfect art gallery, made millions, had a fantastic life. But why was his self-confidence down at the bottom? I've always wondered about that. And then on page 14, he says, "Anyway, there's a line in the story. To the caliph I am dirt, but to the dirt I am a caliph. Well, he had to be an educated guy to say something that good. But how would you like it if someone said you were dirt? Life is so unfair, and people are always doing those things. I probably would still be down if JD had not insinuated that I should write my autobiography. So why is Forrest down? Could it be because of the raid that happened? I don't know. I mean, it's something to think about, right? Why was his self-confidence down at the bottom? So, and then on the next page, in page 15, it's kind of the weird page with the big font. But he says, "Not a day passes that I don't question myself about what lies just ahead and whether or not I can make it happen like it's supposed to." Now it sounds like he's talking about the treasure hunt, right? So what is it that he's doing to make it happen like it's supposed to be? What it's kind of just by chance whoever finds it, but how would he be able to make it like it's happened like it's supposed to be? Whether he can make the chase fun or whatever, but I thought that was an interesting thing to say also. So let's go to page 138. Okay, well, before I go to page 138, I want to bring you to page 133 about Gardner's Island. The informant that brought that whole thing, that raid that went through Utah and a whole bunch of other places, the informant's name was Gardner. Now on page 133, he talks about he had a dream of being reincarnated as Captain Kidd and went to Gardner's Island looking for the treasure. I thought that was interesting. Probably nothing, but interesting to say the least. Okay, so I'll go to page 138 now. So he buried these bells about 3 feet deep, so a metal detector couldn't find them. Some may be on land owned by the American people, but tended to by the Bureau of Land Management. Other bells have words that say, "God will forgive me. That's what he does. Imagination is more important than knowledge, and it doesn't matter who you are. It only matters who they think you are." So if he's hiding these bells, these sayings must have a lot of meaning to him personally. So God will forgive me, that's what he does. Why would he write that? What in Forrest Fenn's life is he feeling bad upon that? He feels God will forgive me. And it doesn't matter who you are. It only matters who they think you are. So what does everyone think of Forrest and this chase? But what is it really? So, okay, let's go to the next one, page 145. Okay, so I'll read. "And I've learned the anguish brought by misdeeds made in later life comes in larger doses than the misdeeds made in adolescence. Only an experience can teach thoroughly and with the speed that is not always available in the classroom. Embarrassing incidents educate the best and the fastest and can come with a lasting sting." So misdeeds made in later life, what would be those that Forrest Fenn did? Why would he say that? "And only experience can teach with speed that is not always available in the classroom. Embarrassing incidents educate the best of us." What would be a really embarrassing incident that happened to Forrest Fenn? Could it be the raid? Could it be the BLM sneaking on his property? I don't know. What do you guys think? So let's go to the next page, page 147. So it says, "Now I feel my father is sitting on the edge of a cloud somewhere watching. If he knows everything about me, he's pretty busy lighting candles, some of them on both ends. But I hope he knows that I've been sometimes guilty only by innuendo, and that's why I wrote my epitaph with such profundity. I wish I could have lived to do the things I was attributed to." So is he saying that a lot of the stuff that he's been accused of, he didn't do, and he wishes he could have? I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting thing to write on your epitaph, because he has, like he says, he's been accused of some pretty serious things. So this is just something to think about. I'm not saying this has anything to do with the chase and where the treasure is hidden, but I'm just saying if you're going to spend all your time, I know a lot of people do, myself included. If you're going to spend a lot of time, you have to think of the what ifs. What if this has something to do with the chase? What if the BLM sneaking on the San Lazaro Pueblo and getting Indian bones has something to do with it? Or all this, debate about the archaeological community and them scouring Fenn and all the Indians saying he's cursed and that he's a bad person because of what he's done in his past. So, just something to think about. I really want to get this video out, and I hope people understand that I'm just bringing up what ifs. I love Forrest Fenn, great guy. I love what he's done. What a great idea to hide the treasure chest, and what good has came out of it. I have nothing but respect for Fenn, and none of this reflects on what I think his character is, but I'm just bringing up, like I said, the what ifs. So let me know what you guys think. Send me an email or write a comment below, and I will catch you on the next video.